Welcome to Bezalel Flags Media. Today I want to talk about how God speaks in pictures. God speaks in pictures. You know, in Job 33:14, it talks about how God speaks once or twice, yet no one notices. You know, he speaks in dreams and in visions, and we don't want to box him in one way. I can remember I used to want to hear God in the still small voice, and I would sit there still in silence for such a long time, and you know, I would hardly hear anything except for my wandering mind most of the time in the initial stages. But I found also that God began to speak to me or impress upon me, show me that when I initially set into that place of learning to hear his voice, that I shouldn't have put a limit on him on how he's going to speak and box him in that way, because he speaks in many different ways, but we like to explore the different ways, and I come to find that is during the early seasons of learning to sit still in his presence, that there was really nothing that I heard much from him other than the fact that I began to come into a place of silence and stillness, and knowing him in that place of stillness, whereby I believe what was occurring was that I was getting my heart and spirit and mind was being positioned in order that I could be more in tune throughout the rest of the day, having been in that place of stillness. It says somewhere, be still and know that I'm God. So there's a place of just being quiet in his presence, and there's a knowing that comes by the Spirit, is spirit to spirit knowing. So this was something that I experienced in the early stages, and a lot of my frustration and discouragement was overcome understanding the fact that even though I was expecting to hear the, quote, still small voice, and I didn't, and I was frustrated, and the enemy would take advantage and basically say, you know, what benefit did you get from that, you know, to try and discourage me in learning to be still. But I come to understand again that in the process of quieting myself, I come to a place of stillness where there was a interaction in the spirit, between spirit to spirit, that was beyond words, and positioned me in order to be more sensitive throughout the day. So it's like exercising. You're building your ears and your eyes. Because after a while I began to realize, Lord, then you speak to me whatever way you want to. So we're going to today we're going to talk about how God speaks in pictures, because that's one of my favorite ways, but it's not the only way, and I'm not going to put the Lord in any way limit on him and say when he speaks to me, he's going to speak to me in pictures only. But no, he'll speak to me and to us in whatever way he wants to. And oftentimes dreams, you know, he will speak to us in dreams, and it's actually a prophetic fulfillment of Joel's prophecy that in the last days there would be an increase of dreams and visions would come upon young men, and old men would dream dreams, and so, you know, God does speak, and he will. There will be an increase. There is an increase of the realm of dreams and visions, the communication of God through dreams and visions. And so, like, I want to read from Job 33, starting at verse 14. It says, "Indeed, God speaks once or twice, yet no one notices it. In a dream, a vision of the night, when sound sleep falls on men, while they slumber in their beds. Then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction, that he may turn man aside from his conduct and keep man from pride. He keeps back his soul from the pit and his life from passing over into Sheol." Now this verse, I like to really zone in on the part where he says God speaks once or twice, yet no one notices. In a dream, a vision of the night, yet no one notices. Because, you know, like, oftentimes when God speaks, it's spontaneous. And when it comes to him speaking in a dream, when your conscious mind isn't really awakened, if you will, or alert, your conscious mind, but your subconscious mind. You're in that twilight state. You're in that state of being asleep, suspended. Your mind's like kind of suspended. In that place, things come and they just flow spontaneously. And oftentimes, even in the awake state, when God speaks in a picture, it just sometimes it's like a spontaneous cutting across the mind. A picture just comes across your normal flow of thought. It just like intersects it, or cuts across the current flow of your thinking. And so that's the spontaneity of the voice of God, and we got to learn how to recognize that. And we're always going to be practicing to discern and recognize those things, because He often speaks in pictures that are spontaneous, that cut across our normal train of thought. And so, like pictures, dreams, dreams are metaphoric. As you might have heard, and from many other people, is like the language of dreams are metaphoric. They're parabolic. They're full of imagery and things that come and it's like God speaks to us in pictures, and as we sleep, and we take those pictures and put words to them. That's a dream interpretation, and we got to think in a way that's metaphoric. We got to think in picture language, if you will, so like when He communicates, oftentimes He communicates with us in pictures that we're like inclined towards, like things that are close to our hearts. He'll use images and symbols, and they mean something to us. But he'll speak to us, and He'll put a picture in the mind, and He'll put a flow of pictures, a story in our minds. While we're in a state of sleep, slumbering in our beds, it says He opens the ears of men and seals their instruction. That's pretty interesting, because our ears have to be open to the Spirit, and you can have closed ears and closed eyes, but God is the God who opens the eyes, and He gives sight. He's the God who opens the ears and gives ability to hear what the Spirit is saying, because you can hear but not yet hear what the Spirit's saying. You can see but yet not see what the Spirit is seeing and showing you. So we need to have our ears opened and our eyes open, so we can begin to see and allow God to communicate His picture languages to us. Visual language of God. I like to call it like the light pictures of God, whereby He just communicates and He speaks to us, and it comes at us as a spontaneous picture, image. And I like to see all the different encounters in the Scripture, and see how God communicated to people, and how He visually communicated to people. I think about Ezekiel, where he saw a hand being stretched out to him, and in the hand was a scroll, and it opened it up, and there was writing on the in the scroll, and on the outside. He saw this thing, and then he heard the voice, and the voice came, and the voice said, "Take it and eat it. It'll be like honey in your mouth, and then it'll be bitter in your stomach." And so he interacted with the speech of God, the picture language of God. He interacted with it. He began to stretch it out, his hand, and received that scroll and ate it. So it was interacting in a vision with God. He's interacting in the spirit realm. There was a true interaction, an activity, a spiritual interaction was happening, where something was being offered to him in a visionary form, and it was the voice of God that came to him, stretched forth a hand with the scroll in it, and opened it up, and told him to take it and eat it. And so he did. He interacted with that picture language that came to him. And so as he interacted, there was an impartation of spiritual substance into him. I think about a dream that I had many years ago, where in the dream I was flying with a friend of mine who was at one time a vineyard pastor. And we were flying, and we flew into this house. I don't know where it was, but somewhere in the spirit. And as we landed in the house, we were walking in a room, and out came a man, and he was like an old man. He had a long beard, and he was like a real old man. And when he came up to us, I said to him, "You're one of the ancient ones, aren't you?" And he reached forth both of his hands. He had bread in one hand, and I believe he had I don't remember quite what he had in the other hand, but he had a cup with liquid in it. And so I received the bread. He offered it to us. I received it and took it in. I ate it, and then I took the drink and I drank it in, and then I woke up. So this was a dream that I had many years ago, and in that encounter in the spirit, it was like I was interacting with in my mind's eye, if you will, but it was in a subconscious state, or in a state of sleep. But my spirit was awake, so my spirit was able to. I was seeing this all. I was viewing it, but I was also not only viewing it, but interacting in that realm and dimension. And I believe that as I interacted, and God was speaking to me and revealing, taking me into this place, that there was an impartation of that substance of what it was that I ate of, and that what I drank of, there was a real spiritual imparting of spiritual substance that went into me. And so, like, this is just one way that God communicates. He communicates to us in dreams, and he takes us into the realm of the spirit in dreams, and we actually can experience things there that are just as real, if not more real, than this world. Sometimes the saying comes to my mind. Sometimes the saying, "Are you in the dream, or is the dream in you, or are you in the dream? Is the dream in you, or are you in the dream?" Sometimes you can't even tell. If it's just a dream you're dreaming, or you're actually in the dream. And the reality is, God's in that spirit realm. I believe that our spirit can be in another place, in the heavenly realms. I believe that man's house was literally a place in the spirit, a dwelling place. This man's house, it was his dwelling place, and this ancient one, I believe he was one that had gone before us, and he was an ancient saint, for all I know, but he had come in and released something that, and I believe it was in the spirit. And so in the book of Revelation, it says, "Rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell there." You're talking about heavens there. That's a plural, not heaven, but heavens, and you who dwell there. And then it talks about in the book of Ephesians, how God has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly realms, plural again. So I believe that in the spirit, there's dwelling places, that there are people dwelling there. Just like we live here on earth in houses and stuff, in the spirit, there's houses too. There's dwelling places. People live there for eternity. And we can have an encounter by the sovereignty of God with someone there. And who's to say that we can't? People say, think you can't communicate. People use the scripture about communicating with the dead, which is something we don't do. We don't operate in necromancy. But those people that have gone before us are not dead in the kingdom. They're living. God is the God of the living and not of the dead. And God is sovereign. If he chooses to allow you to communicate with someone in the spirit that's already gone before you, then he can do it. It's his choice. He's sovereign, and it's not communicating with the dead, but it's a sovereign act and choice of God. I think about the Mount of Transfiguration, when Jesus took Peter, James, and John up to a very high mountain, and there before them he was transfigured. And in the process of being transfigured, Moses and Elijah showed up. And this is, I don't know how many years after Moses died and Elijah took off, but Moses died, and but yet he showed up there with Elijah and began to communicate with the Lord in his transfigured state. And so there we see in Scripture that Jesus communicated with the man that did die, Moses, and he communicated with Elijah, who left the earth in a chariot. And so anyway, I'm getting on a little track here, a rabbit trail, but that's okay. That's how the prophetic flows often happens. But God speaks to us in pictures, and he'll give you a picture. He'll communicate something by a vision to you while you're asleep, or in a dream, or while you're awake. You could be praying for someone, and all of a sudden you have a picture come to you. An example is like, I had an encounter where I was in Salem, Massachusetts, with a team of people that we were doing a prophetic outreach during their the haunted happenings, and I was learning to hear God speak, his voice come to me in the realm of pictures, and I was learning how to hear the voice of God as it pertains to it. What we're talking about, the picture language of God. And so what we learned to do is we learned to just ask the Lord to speak to us about the person that was before us. And so what we had is a booth set up, and we had lines of people come in and sit at our booth, our tables, on the chairs there, and we had a row of us as a team, and people would come in, and we'd just look at the individuals, and we'd ask the Lord, speak to us about them. And we'd tell them, we're just going to look at you, and as we stare at you, that's going to kind of be a little bit uncomfortable. It won't last long. We just ask God. We believe God speaks, and we ask him to speak to us, and we're just going to look at you. And as we look, sometimes God gives us an impression or a picture, and so like we explained that. We did look at quite a few people, and one of the examples was I stared at a young man with another young man. Two of them sat in the chairs, and as I looked at him, I saw like a sheriff's badge superimposed over. It just came as I was staring at him, and just kind of cut into my mind's eye, into the view of my mind's view, just superimposed with my eyes, physical eyes open. I saw it superimposed. And so as learning, you're just starting out. When you're just starting out, you're kind of like wondering, and you try not to doubt yourself, and you don't want to doubt. But sometimes the reality is you struggle. You're wondering in your mind, is this just my imagination, Lord? Is this just me? And so, we have to press through that and just say, we're learning, so we're just going to take a risk and go for it. And that's what I had to do. And so as I looked at him, I told him, I said, as I looked at you, I just really felt, and I didn't give him the thrust of the word, the raw word. Like, I just didn't tell him I looked at you and I saw a sheriff's badge, because I was kind of still filling out the waters, if you will. And so I looked at him and said, when I looked at you, I see like you're really an individual, possibly you're like involved in some kind of authority. Maybe you're like, you're training for authority. You're into some realm of authority, and then he looked at his brother, looked at me, or his friend that was sitting next to him, and then, and I told him, I just want to encourage you to just keep pursuing that. And I really feel like that's something for your life. And so, towards the end, after the other team member gave him a word, he just like really was encouraged, and he was sharing how encouraged he was. And he looked at me and he told me, your word was right on. And I just want to let you know that, I'm actually in school training to be a sheriff. So you see there how that was, that word was right on. That picture language of God that came to me was right on. And it, when things like this happen, you get amazed. When God speaks to you and you actually take a risk and give what you saw, what he gave to you to give out, and you find out like it was so smack right on, you get excited and you get amazed. So you're like a participant as well as as one who delivers, and you participate and you experience the same incredible, amazing work of God, if you will, like the voice of God. You experience that excitement, the amazing ability of God. And so that word came to me when God spoke to me. It came to me in a picture, a sheriff's badge. I saw it, and I could have straight out told him, I see a sheriff's badge. But, we learn, and so like, oftentimes you'll be walking down the street and you'll look at someone and you'll see something over their life, like another encounter that I had. And we're talking about the picture, how God speaks to us in pictures, and this is only one way that He speaks to us, and it is a really primary way. It's the one of the, I believe, the main modes of God's communication in the spirit to people is by vision and pictures. God is a God of pictures, a picture language. God is a God who imagined, pictured things up within him, created them, conceived them within, and then he spoke them into being. That which he saw and what came into existence was the image of what was the tangible substance of what was imaged within him, which was also a substance as well. So, but it becomes something of a substance in this third dimension. So, God communicates in pictures, and so we need to be open to see in our mind's eye, in our imagination, or outside of our mind's eye, in our physical eyes, because those pictures can show up in the natural, superimposed over someone. Another encounter I had once where I was looking at an individual, and he kind of like was. You can tell he was hesitant. He didn't want to really do it, and then his relatives, the two younger kids, were kind of on their way out, and they were kind of like pushing him, like wooing him away, and so he started leaving, and I looked at him as well, and right before he was leaving, and I just wanted to, I kind of stepped in there too, and I told him, we just want to like to encourage people. We believe that God's created people with a destiny, and that he speaks, and just want to let you know that while he was on his way out, he was already moving, and a little bit but he stopped just politely just to let me finish what I was sharing, and so I told him, like, when I was looking at you, I saw like you standing before a computer screen, and there was some kind of like computer graphics works or something that you were doing, and it just arrested him when I said that. And he just stopped, and he kind of like took his breath, and he took it in, and he was saying, "What is it that you saw?" And I told him, explained to him again, and I told him, and then I said to him, I just want to encourage you. I really believe that God's put a gift and a talent and an ability within you, so that you can literally. You have a potential that you can become. I believe that you're gonna create things. You're gonna be a forerunner and create things on the screen and in graphics and visual effects type stuff, and so he just got really impacted from that. And right before, when I finished sharing that with him, and I told him I'd like to bless him in his destiny, and that God would enable him to fulfill what he was created to do, because just like the inventor of a computer knows that how that thing functions more than anybody else, so it is with our lives. In his life, I told him that God knows. He created every human being, and he knows what they were wired and function are created and to do and to function in to its highest potential. And so I just encourage him and I bless him. And he told me, like, I'm involved. I do work, visual work on computers. I do like graphics and type of work on visual effects type work on the computer. And so he was really impacted, and he just, it really arrested him. It grabbed him. But I was looking at him asking God, Lord, let me just see what you see. Like I was saying, Lord, show me something about him. You know his heart. You made him and you love him. And so, like, as I say that and just looked, the picture came before my eyes. And it was the picture language of God again, because God, that's one way God, again, we're talking about how God speaks in pictures. And so that came in that encounter just like that. And he was very impacted. He was touched by that. And so it's a great blessing to experience that again, to participate with God and allowing God to use you in that way. Another strange encounter I had once, I was looking at a woman, and a friend of mine that was an intern at Streams Ministries, and we were in the house sitting at a table, and we were just practicing hearing God's voice for one another, looking at one another's faces, and just getting words for one another. As I looked at her, I saw the strangest thing. I saw like horns coming out of her head. And so you think about horns, dang man, horns? Is that a devil? No, but the strange thing is God. In the book of Revelation, Jesus is mentioned as the lamb with 7 horns in his head and 7 eyes. And so we got to understand, like, horns, just because something's got horns don't mean it's a devil. The horns speak of power and authority. It speaks of a kingdom and power and authority. And I believe what I saw and I began to get understanding. I said, I saw this, and I believe she was taken back a bit too from hearing that, because I would have been as well. But what happens is the understanding that came to me regarding that was that God was developing a kingdom mindset. A kingdom mentality, a kingdom mindset was coming forth out of her, like a power and authority was rising up from within her. A mindset of that was going to reflect the authority and power of God. It was coming forth, and so that was the meaning of that vision, that picture that came to my mind for her. And so that was a strange one right there, but God spoke in a picture again. Another encounter in the experiencing the picture language of God I had was I was sitting at a Starbucks with a friend of mine and his wife, and we were just talking about the Lord and the things of the Spirit. And I was on I had a flow of thoughts. I was on a train of thoughts. My mind was just going on a subject and talking, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I see this picture flash through my mind, and it was a picture of the wife. As I looked at her, glanced at her, a picture flowed through my mind, and it was regarding her. And when I looked at her, I saw a picture of Catherine Coleman, and she was just with authority on the stage and just releasing healing power and authority. And I just grabbed my attention. It arrested my attention. I just stopped what I was talking about and just said, hey, this is pretty wild. As I was talking to you, I just had this flow, this picture that cut across the train of my thought, a picture. And the picture was, I saw Catherine Coleman, and she was dressed in her white dress, and she was with authority, releasing preaching and the power of God and the healing powers there, and it's flowing. And so she responded back, it's like, that's wild, man. That's incredible. I just had someone speak that to me recently, and as well as I've had that word many times, that I would flow in authority like Catherine Coleman. So that's another experience and encounter with the picture language of God, and it was very powerful and really impacted and encouraged her. And so that, again, like the voice of God, when it comes oftentimes as a picture, a flowing picture, flowing thoughts and flowing pictures, spontaneous. And one of the Hebrew word for intercession that I learned many years ago from Jim Gall is the word pagah. And that word actually means a chance encounter, accidental intersecting. So it's like a chance encounter thought or accidental intersecting thought. You're driving down the street in your mind, and if you will, your thoughts are flowing down this one route. You're going and you're flowing down on this one route of thinking. You're on this pattern of thinking, this route of thinking. All of a sudden, this thought from out of nowhere cuts across the train of your thought, the train, the route of your thinking. All of a sudden, this, having nothing to do with the subject that you're thinking about, cuts across your mind, or a picture cuts across your mind, and out of nowhere and spontaneous. And oftentimes that's the Lord speaking. It's a pagah encounter, a chance encounter, an intersecting and chance encounter, accidental intersecting thought. And he used that word pagah in the context of talking about intercession, a go between. You stand between, and but in the same manner, the pagah thought, pagah thoughts, chance encounter pictures, the voice of God comes like that. It cuts across the train of our thought. And just wanted to share that as a little picture to give more clarity to how this stuff flows and encounters happen like that. So that God speaks to us in pictures, and we got to begin to be people that are renewed in the spirit of our minds, flooded with the thoughts of God, the mind of God, and the thinking way, the ways of God, the way that God thinks. You want to think like the Lord thinks we need to meditate in his word and engraft his thoughts and his words inside of us, because we begin to have the mind of God, the mind of the Spirit, think as he thinks. For, it says in Isaiah that for my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, and my ways higher than your ways. And so his thoughts are way higher, and so we need to begin to walk in that place where his thoughts are more dominant, his ways are dominant within us, his proven paths, his ways of thinking, his thoughts. And oftentimes Jesus taught, when he taught, he spoke in parables and picture stories and to convey truths, and so the Lord will convey things he wants to convey to us in pictures and images, and release those things to us, and whether we're consciously awake or whether we're in a dream. And so in the dream, when he speaks in metaphors, it needs to be taken as interpreted metaphorically, not literally. Like if you see in a dream like your teeth falling out or something, it doesn't mean literally your teeth falling out, but it actually means metaphorically you want to understand the teeth is something to use to chew and break down things so you can ingest it. And it's like its ability to comprehend something. It represents comprehension, ability to comprehend and understand something. If you're losing teeth, it's like your loss of ability to comprehend or understand truth or something. And oftentimes the type of teeth that's falling out will give more detail to the meaning of the dream. The wisdom teeth falling out, the eye teeth. You're losing you're losing wisdom. You have need of wisdom. You have need of discernment, perception, and you're losing perception or discernment, ability to see. So metaphorically, God speaks in dreams, but in consciously awake, visions come. They're more literal, like the sheriff's badge. That was literal. Speaking of something that was very literally true in a way to the person or to you. So visions, again, they're more literal, and dreams are metaphoric. There's so much more to go into this, and so I'd like to be able to continue on, but this is the amount of time that I'm going to have to go on in this. So I just pray right now that the Lord would bless you with his impartation of understanding and wisdom, and that your eyes would be enlightened to begin to see and to perceive the language, the metaphoric language, the picture language of God and God's visions, and language of the Spirit, the picture language of the Lord as he speaks, that it would be increased in your life, and you just step out into that awareness that he does speak, and become even more open to the pictures that come to you, and be able to recognize them as God's voice when they come, and also to discern when they're not his voice, because the spirit realm communicates in spontaneity, and that's the entire spirit realm. So it can be a flow of spontaneous thoughts, or pictures can also proceed from the kingdom of darkness as well. But we just need to discern the fruit and the of these things that flow to us and come into us, and how to take them captive and discern that, and reject what's obviously not encouraging, edifying, or comforting. So Lord, just bless every hearer in Jesus' name, and let them begin to see and perceive your voice in pictures as it comes in pictures. In Jesus' name, amen.